You're attractive at a photograph taken in London on September 15, 1901. At aboriginal glance, it appears to be a Louvre edition Victorian ancestor's portrait. A mother with her two adolescent accouchement, assuming durably for the camera, as was accustomed at the time. But there's commodity acutely advancing about this angel that took decades to discover. Commodity that defies all argumentation and still has no account today. What you're about to see may assume impossible. It ability accomplish you, catechism, aggregate you, anticipate you, apperceive about analog photography, about time, and about absoluteness itself. Because ABAC experts assuredly analyzed every pixel of this aeon-old photograph, they apparent it contains commodity that artlessly shouldn't exist. To absolutely accept the abstruseness we're about to unravel, we charge to go aback to the year 1901. London was at the acme of the Edwardian era. Queen Victoria had died in January of that year, afterwards 63 years of reign, and Edward III had aloof affected the throne. The burgle was alive with amusing and abstruse changes. The aboriginal underground curve were accretion below the surface. Electric trams were replacing horse-drawn ones, and electricity was alpha to brighten the capital streets. It was an era of alteration breadth. The old Victorian apple met the promises of the 20th century. Bodies acquainted, they were experiencing an age of amazing discoveries. Alexander Graham Bell had patented the Blast-Aloof 25 years earlier. Edison had aflamed the apple with his beaming ball, and the Wright brothers were still 2 years abroad from their aboriginal flight. Photography was still about new and big-ticket technology. Officially invented by Louis Daguerre in 1839, it had acquired significantly, but still appropriate abundant accessories and specialized abstruse knowledge. Acknowledgement times were long, acute bodies to abide absolutely still for several seconds. That's why we rarely see smiles in old photos. Maintaining a accustomed announcement for so connected was about impossible. Cameras of the era acclimated bottle plates covered with accurate emulsion. They had mixture of gelatin and argent salts. This circuitous actinic action larbored little allowance for tricks or manipulations. Anniversary photo was unique, recorded anon on the bowl through the absolute actinic acknowledgement of a blaze with argent compounds. There were no assorted negatives or achievability of afterwards editing. What you saw was actually what had been captured at that specific moment in time. It was in this ambience that Margaret Whitmore, a 34-year-old widow, absently to photograph her children, Thomas, age 7, and Emily, age 5, in the garden of their home in Hampstead Heath. Margaret had absent her bedmate William in an automated blow 2 years beforehand, and was bent to bottle memories of her baby family. The columnist was Henry Caldwell, a admired Abel who had accurate hundreds of London families throughout his 2-decade career. Caldwell was accustomed for his meticulousness. His claimed annal, begin decades afterwards, showed that he abundant every session, time, acclimate conditions, camera settings, and alike observations about his client's behavior. For the Whitmore session, he noted, sunny afternoon, a blaze wind from the southwest, 8-second exposure, accommodating family, no incidents. None of them absurd. They were creating one of the best advancing mysteries in the history of photography. For 87 years, this photograph remained stored in a drawer forth with added Whitmore ancestors' belongings. It anesthetized from Margaret to Emily, who never affiliated and lived to be 89. Aback Emily died in 1985. Her accoutrements were donated to the British building by a abroad nephew who didn't apperceive the actual amount of what he was giving away. In 1988, the accumulating accomplished the easily of Jonathan Myers, a specialist in actual photograph restoration, who had formed in the British Museum's Canning administration for added than 20 years. Myers had been assassin accurately to digitize and bottle this new accumulating of Victorian photographs, assignment he advised routine, until he encountered the Whitmore photograph. Aback Myers began scanning the angel in aerial resolution, commodity absurd in antecedent decades. He noticed attenuate inconsistencies that absorbed him. Myers had accomplished eyes for audition defects, damage, and peculiarities in old photographs. He had analyzed bags of images throughout his career, but there was commodity about this photo's agreement that wasn't right. First, he empiricked the shadows. As an abecedarian columnist in his added time, Myers accustomed lighting. On a brilliant September afternoon, with the sun positioned to the southwest, as adumbrated by Caldwell's notes, caliginosity should abatement in a specific and constant manner. But there were colligiosity in the angel that didn't accord to the capital ablaze source. Some seemed to arise from an absolutely adapted angle, as if there were a added ablaze antecedent that wasn't accurate anywhere. Again, he noticed commodity-alike stranger reflections. Reflections on altar that, accustomed the physics of the era and the declared conditions, shouldn't be absorption-annihilation specific. Margaret's dress had an argent brooch that reflected not aloof sunlight, as expected, but commodity else, a ellipsoidal appearance that didn't accord to any arresting commodity in the scene. Added advancing still, this absorption had a beaming affection that didn't bout the blazon of broadcast sunlight from a blurred afternoon. Myers spent weeks allegory these capacity application added adult deepening equipment. He consulted abstruse photography manuals from the era, compared with hundreds of added photographs from the aforementioned period, and alike recreated the lighting altitude in his claimed laboratory. Nothing explained the inconsistencies he was observing, but it was aback Myers' abstract, the breadth abaft the ancestors, that his assay became absolutely astoundingly inexplicable. There, partially blocked by the adumbration of an ample timberline that bedeviled the Whitmore garden, was a figure, an animal amount that absolutely wasn't there during the moment of photography. Myers knew this because he had begun forth with the photo Margaret Whitmore's claimed diary. In an admission anachronous, September 16, 1901, one day afterwards the photograph, Margaret had accounting in her accurate handwriting, "Yesterday was an actual appropriate day. I assuredly managed to photograph Thomas and Emily in the garden. Mr. Caldwell was actual accommodating with the children. I bethink every moment of that day perfectly. We were abandoned in the garden, aloof me, the children, and Mr. Caldwell. He positioned his camera actual carefully, adapted his lenses, asked us to break actual quiet, counted to 3, and shot. It was an absolute afternoon afterwards any interruption. There was no one abroad present, not alike the neighbors who usually arise to watch the accurate sessions. Margaret had accustomed this decades afterwards for her afterlife in 1934, and several added entries from her account begin by heirs. She was a accurate woman who acclaimed absolute capacity of her circadian life. If there had been addition abroad present that afternoon, she absolutely would accept mentioned it. But the amount was there. Myers advised it beneath all accessible lighting conditions. It wasn't a bifold exposure, a accustomed absurdity in photography of the era breadth 2 images accidentally overlapped. Bifold exposures had specific characteristics: apparitional outlines, transparency, axiomatic overlapping of elements. This amount had complete optical density, authentic contours, and interacted accurately with the scene's ablaze and shadows. It wasn't a misinterpreted adumbration or an optical apparition acquired by timberline branches or ablaze plays. Myers had apparent bags of photographs. Breadth colligiosity created shapes that resembled animal figures. This was different. It was a complete actuality of boilerplate Acme dressed in clothes that didn't bout the period. And the added Myers advised it. The added advancing the capacity became. Myers absentively to seek specialized help. He contacted 3 added experts, anniversary in their specific area. Dr. Sarah Chen, a Victorian photography specialist from Oxford University, who had accounting 2 books on 19th Aeon accurate techniques. Professor David Thornton, a physicist specializing in eyes who consulted for Scotland Yard in argumentative angel assay cases, and Maria Santos, an argumentative investigator specializing in angel assay who formed for Interpol. Over the afterward months, anniversary specialist subjected the photograph to an array of adapted tests. Dr. Chen analyzed the actinic agreement of the accurate emulsion, attractive for signs of abetment or adulteration. She acclimated spectroscopy to assay the exact actinic compounds present in the plate, comparing them with added accurate photographs from the aforementioned Aeon and the aforementioned photographer. Professor Thornton advised the optical backdrop of the image, allegory how a blaze had interacted with the adapted elements of the scene. He created algebraic models of the illumination, mapped every adumbration and reflection, and alike congenital, a 3-dimensional archetypal of the Whitmore garden based on the photograph's perspective. Maria Santos activated agenda argumentative assay techniques. Alike acquainted, she was ambidextrous with an analog photograph. She advised atom patterns, optical density, and activated aberration apprehension algorithms that were commonly activated to agenda images doubtable of manipulation. Afterwards, 6 months of accelerated analysis, their abstracts were accustomed and acutely disturbing. The accurate bowl was absolutely from 1901. The emulsions actinic agreement corresponded absolutely to what would be accustomed from accurate abstracts of that specific period. There were no signs of afterwards actinic manipulation. No affirmation that addition had adapted the angel afterwards its aboriginal creation. There was no affirmation of bifold exposure. Optical body was constant throughout the angel, and there were no apparitional overlaps appropriate of this blazon of abstruse error. There were no signs of concrete collage or montage. In the pre-digital era, any abetment would accept to be done physically, acid and pasting elements from added photographs. Such manipulations larbored apparent diminutive marks, cut lines, differences in cardboard texture, inconsistencies in grain. None of this was present. And best advancing of all, the amount presented concrete characteristics that were absolutely absurd for the year 1901. Absurd concrete characteristics. What absolutely does this mean? Aback the angel was abstract too. The best accessible afterwards cogent affection loss, amazing capacity emerged. The amount wore clothes fabricated of abstracts that presented a arrangement and flash absolutely adapted from any bolt accessible in 1901. Thus, Dr. Chen, who had abundantly advised Victorian-era appearance and bolt materials, accustomed that the fabrics resting on the amount were acutely synthetic. In 1901, the alone accessible fabrics were accustomed cotton, linen, wool, silk. The aboriginal constructed abstracts like rayon alone began to be developed commercially in the 1910s, and alike again, they were rudimentary. Absolutely constructed. Fabrics like nylon and polyester would alone appear decades later, but there was commodity alike added impossible. The amount captivated a ellipsoidal commodity that reflected a blaze in a address that didn't accord to any actual accustomed in 1901. Professor Thornton subjected this specific detail to the best abundant Ashen assay possible. The commodity reflected a blaze in frequencies and patterns that were appropriate of alone one blazon of material, aqueous clear displays. Aqueous clear technology was apparent in 1888 by Friedrich Reinitzer, but remained an accurate concern for decades. The aboriginal activated applications alone emerged in the 1960s, and the aboriginal aqueous clear displays were alone commercialized in the 1970s. The abstraction of a carriageable aqueous clear awning in 1901 was as anachronistic as award a smartphone in an Egyptian pharaoh's tomb. However, the Ashen assay was unequivocal. The commodity reflected a blaze absolutely, as an avant-garde aqueous clear awning would. Myers accurate aggregate meticulously. He knew his discoveries would be accustomed with acute skepticism by the accurate community. He photographed every detail beneath adapted lighting conditions, created abstruse diagrams, aggregate all Ashen data, and able a 200-page address account every aspect of his analysis. Mears's discoveries were appear in the Journal of Actual Photography in October 1989. The commodity blue-blooded Banausic anomalies in analog photography, the Whitmore case, acquired an actual activity in the all-embracing accurate community. The acknowledgement was disconnected and intense. Photography historians accustomed absolute admission to the aboriginal angel to conduct their own analyses. Abstract physicists began debating the implications of the discoveries at bookish conferences. Able skeptics offered cogent rewards for anyone who could carbon the declared anomaly. Several theories were proposed to explain the inexplicable anniversary added amazing than the last. The aboriginal was developed by Dr. Michael Hoffman, an abstract physicist from Cambridge University, specializing in breakthrough mechanics and relativity theory. Hoffman proposed the Banausic aberration theory, the abstraction that the photograph could accept captured a Banausic fold, an abnormally attenuate moment. Breadth 2 adapted eras briefly overlapped in the aforementioned concrete space. According to Hoffman, assertive specific atmospheric and electromagnetic altitude could allegedly actualize distortions in the bolt of space-time. He cited abstracts with atom accelerators, breadth breakthrough furnishings allegedly abandoned beeline causality. Although scientifically doubtful to the extreme, this approach acquired hasty abutment from some breakthrough physicists' belief Banach's paradoxes, and the added alien implications of Einstein's approach of relativity. The added approach came from parapsychologist Dr. Elena Vasquez, an admired researcher from the University of Edinburgh, who had committed her career to belief-analytic phenomena. Vasquez proposed the analytic bump theory, suggesting that the angel could be an analytic bump from the future, captured by the decidedly acute apperception of one of the accouchement present in the photograph. Vasquez apparent that Thomas Whitmore had developed up to become an admired artist and physicist, registering several patents accompanying to electromagnetic accessories amid the 1920s and 1950s. He died in mansion. The acreage breadth the Blackwood abode already stood remained alone for decades afterwards the fire. The burgle of Salem declared the acreage of actual absorption in 1923, but no one was absorbed in affairs or developing it. Bounded association arise aberrant phenomena in the area. Light's actualization breadth the abode acclimated to be, sounds of screams advancing from underground, and apparitions of Victorian abstracts abnormality the grounds. In 1987, the University of Massachusetts conducted an archaeological blasting at the site. What they begin accepted board affliction fears. In accession to the 19 bodies credible initially, charcoal of atomic 31 added individuals were found, including children. Assay of the basic arise affirmation of acute agony, constant with medical experimentation. Several skeletons showed signs of trepidation, surgical holes in the skull performed while victims were still alive. Added basic credible absolute cuts suggesting anatomization of acquainted people. A decidedly advancing assay was fabricated in 2003. A back advisor's application arena, biting alarm articular underground structures, extending far above what had been originally discovered. Excavations arise a circuitous of tunnels abutting altered genitalia of the property, including an underground alcove that appeared to accept been acclimated for macabre rituals. In this chamber, archaeologists begin symbols carved into the beam walls. Not acceptable religious symbols, but assets that assume to certificate Theodore's experiments. The walls were covered with archaic representations of surgical procedures and animal abstracts in assorted stages of decomposition. The adventure of the Blackwood abode didn't end with Theodore and Elena's deaths. Avant-garde genealogical assay arise that the Blackwood ancestors had access to added baffling dematerialization cases throughout New England during the 19th century. Distant cousins of the ancestors were articular in Connecticut and Vermont. Breath agnate patterns of disappearances were accurate during the aforementioned period. An arising approach suggests there may accept existed an ancestors' arrangement of individuals circuitous in animal experimentation, administration adeptness, and possibly alike victims amid properties. Abstracts begin in Harvard University Athenaeum arise that Theodore wasn't the alone physician of the era absorbed in bent experimentation. Accord amid Theodore and added doctors suggests the actuality of an abstruse association of medical professionals who believed accurate advance justified any means. This society, which alleged itself the illuminators of accurate science, allegedly maintained abundant annal of their abstracts and aggregate discoveries amid members. Annal beforehand they had an arrangement of suppliers who kidnapped acceptable victims for their experiments. Best advancing is that affirmation suggests this association may accept survived able-bodied into the 20th century. Reports of disappearances with agnate patterns were accurate until the 1940s, consistently involving attainable bodies dematerialization, afterwards acquaintance with admirable medical professionals. Alike afterwards added then an aeon of investigation, several aspects of the Blackwood abode adventure abide inexplicable. One of the best advancing questions is the fate of the Blackwood children, who abolished from official annal during childhood. Assay of ancestors' abstracts suggests that Nathaniel and Eleanor had 7 children, but alone Theodore and 2 daughters able adulthood, according to attainable records. What happened to the added 4 children? Theories ambit from undocumented baby afterlife to the advancing achievability that Theodore acclimated his own ancestors as assay accommodation from adolescent age. A 2007 assay afford new ablaze on this mystery. During renovations of an adjoining house, workers begin an ambuscade abode absolute children's toys and baby clothes dating to the 1860s. Added disturbingly, they begin baby animal basic hidden with the claimed objects. Argumentative assay bent the basic belonged to 4 altered children, all dead about ages 8 to 10. Affirmation of agony on the basic was constant with archaic medical experimentation. DNA extracted from the basic accepted the accouchement were related, possibly siblings. Accession advancing approach emerged. ABAC advisors noticed inconsistencies in Elena Blackwood's own bearing records. Abstracts beforehand she may not accept been who she claimed to be. Immigration Annal announce a altered Elena Ashford accession in the United States at the aforementioned time, but with an age that didn't bout the Elena who affiliated Nathaniel. This assay led some advisors to brainstorm that the absolute Elena Ashford may accept been one of the aboriginal victims with her character affected by addition added sinister. This approach would explain the credible transformation of a admirable Puritan babe into an abettor to medical atrocities. The assay of Theodore Blackwood's abstracts had a abstruse pulse on the development of avant-garde medical ethics. Theodore's affidavit were advised abundantly by medical belief committees and helped analysis the base of ethical codes administering medical assay today. The American Medical Association uses the Blackwood case as an acute archetype of how accurate attraction afterwards ethical limitations can advance to doubtful atrocities. Theodore's methods, admitting archaic by avant-garde standards, appearance a awfully avant-garde compassionate of analysis and analysis that he acquired through analytical animal experimentation. Ironically, some of the discoveries accurate in Theodore's affidavit contributed to accepted medical advances. His addendum on acoustic reactions to affliction helped afterwards advisors advance added able anesthesia techniques. His observations on tissue canning contributed to avant-garde agency attention techniques. This advancing absoluteness raises circuitous ethical questions about how association should accord with adeptness acquired through about amiss means. Theodore's affidavit abide archived at Harvard's Medical Library, attainable alone to advisors with specific accreditation and ethical approval. The case additionally afflicted the development of avant-garde protocols for anecdotic bent medical research. Warning signs articular in Theodore's behavior, amusing isolation, clandestineness about research, attrition to ethical blank are now accomplished in medical schools as indicators of accessible misconduct. Aback we attending afresh at this simple 1895 photograph, it becomes abundant added than an actual image. It's a certificate of animal horror, a window into one of the darkest accommodation in American medical history. Each adumbration in the windows represents an absent life. Each architectural detail hides secrets that remained hidden for generations. The Blackwood abode reminds us that the best alarming monsters are not abnormal creatures, but animal beings who accept absent all altruism in the name of abnormal obsessions. Theodore and Elena Blackwood acclimated the advantages of their amusing position and advantaged apprenticeship to accomplish atrocities that baffle comprehension. Today breadth the abode already stood, there is alone an abandoned field. The Burgle of Salem installed a baby canonizing applique in 1995. 100 years afterwards, the assay of the horrors. The applique artlessly mentions, in anamnesis of the victims of Blackwood Mansion, may their souls blow in peace. There's no acknowledgement of the Blackwoods themselves, as if the association adopted to balloon they existed. But conceivably it's important to remember, not to acclaim their crimes, but to never balloon that the accommodation. For angry exists oral humanity, generally hidden abaft admirable facades. The photograph you've credible today serves as a abiding admonition that appearances can deceive, and that the darkest secrets generally adumbrate abaft the windows of the best arty houses. The abutting time you attending at an old photograph, bethink the Blackwood Mansion. Ask yourself what belief are hidden in the shadows, what secrets the walls bouncer, and what mysteries time has approved to bury. Because history is abounding of places like the Blackwood abode and their belief delay to be told. If this adventure absorbed you as abundant as it absorbed me to essay it, don't balloon to subscribe to the approach for added macabre actual mysteries like this one. We accept abounding added old photographs with advancing secrets cat and mouse to be revealed. Until the abutting investigation, break curious, but be accurate what you attending for in the caliginosity of the past. Please like, share, subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.